She Loves Herself with Jill Ritchie, showing you how to embrace vulnerability and unearth your power within.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to She Loves Herself, the podcast with myself, Jill Ritchie, and we are doing our special collaboration season with the Intuitive Psychology Association and our lovely Sarah Gregg, co-founder and friend.
Hello. I always do want to say I'm so excited to be here because I feel like that is the biggest cliche on every podcast. I'm determined to find something else as soon as I tune into any podcast. It's like, I'm so excited to be here. I need to find something different to say.
I know. I'm loving these episodes because we've had such great feedback so far, and you know this podcast is in its 10th season, and it's so good to have this collaboration of bringing the two together, right? Because She Loves Herself really is so aligned to what we create within IPA. And so obviously, whilst we also train incredible men within IPA, we are both women, and we are all about how do we really rise as women in the industry? How do we become exceptional and be in our authenticity at the same time? And how do we help more women quantum leap?
Yeah.
Right. And we hear this a lot. I used to hear this. Actually, Quantum Leap was a program I used to
watch. I know, I used to watch it too. That's an old school throwback.
I know. Listen, there'll be people listening to this of our age, Sarah, that will totally remember.
Yeah.
But I remember hearing this and thinking, how do you quantum leap? Like, what even is that? But I actually, as I reflect, and probably people would have looked at me as an individual in the coaching space when I first came in and probably thought you did quantum leap. And I think quantum leap really comes from a real knowing and an unshakable knowing and belief of this is going to happen. I just know it with certainty. So how do we help our listeners, okay, who are listening to this episode? How do we help them quantum leap? How do we explain quantum leap?
Oh, let's start with like a definition. I love a good definition because you might be thinking quantum leap, like what exactly is that? So when we talk about quantum leap, and we're talking about stepping out of that cause and effect model that we often have, that the world works a certain way and it follows a linear pattern. So I'll use my kind of experience. So whenever I quit my job, sold my house and all of my stuff, over kind of like it's coming up for 8 years ago now, I really wanted to be an author. I really I kind of had this childhood dream that I wanted to write a book, and everyone told me it's really hard to be an author. It's really difficult to get a book deal. You know, you have to submit countless kind of manuscripts, and you've got to go through this whole process, and you need an agent. And I kind of went, yeah, cool, but I believe that I'll do it. And I just had this deep knowing that somehow it would just happen. And of course, it's about aligned action. Within 6 months of me starting my business, I had a book deal because I wrote a post on Instagram about a journal system for flow, and an editor in New York, who was one of like 53 people reading my blog, reached out and was like, I think that this is a book deal. And that's what quantum leaping is. Quantum leaping is making that decision that you don't operate in ordinary time. It's making that decision that actually it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be a slog. It doesn't have to follow this kind of like long process, that actually you get to make significant shifts in your life when you align with who you are authentically. Like, I really believe that for me, you know, I took a lot of aligned action to be a writer. And then when we take that aligned action, opportunities align with us. And that's when something really magical happens. You know, you look at your career, Jill, you know, you trained as a coach, had left kind of your corporate career. And within a very short space of time, you know, you were working with celebrities and athletes and charging, you know, your worth and running sellout programs and worse. And that's a quantum leap, because often when people start this journey, right, they have a belief of like, well, it'll take me 6 months to like build up my client list, and then I'll do that. And then in a year's time, it'll do. that is kind of a Newtonian kind of like cause and effect model. What we're talking about is how do you just fully dive into your full potential?
I love it. And yeah, and we've spoke about this actually before on a previous episode about how you, for me anyway, it was like there was no plan B. I just knew I
Yeah.
had to make it work. And yes, I was filled with doubt. And this actually leads us really beautifully on to talk about shadow work, because I had so much fear, sleepless nights, oh my goodness, who am I to do this? But I kept going because I knew, even underneath all of those layers of fear, that I had something, that there was something bigger than my fear, unbeknown to me at the time, this calling that I had to do it. And I think so if you're listening to this and you might feel like your gut instinct, like it's like your intuition knew, like when you can silence the mind and when you can take some deep breaths and really tune into the heart, into your gut, almost in your stomach, your heart, and it's like, okay, ask the heart a question, get in silence, be out in nature, ask the heart the question. It's a very different answer from what the mind tells you, because the mind will tell you, no, you can't. It's replaying all of the experiences that you've had and had programmed in you your entire life. So based on what your head's going to tell you, it's going to tell you no, right? Based on all of the programming that you've had all of your entire life, it's going to tell you you can't do it. But when you're able to drop out of that heart and really tune into out of the head and really tune into the heart, your truth comes through. And it doesn't make logical sense. It never has. And now I'm at a point, Sarah, where if my head can make too much sense of it, I know I'm off kilter. I know I'm like thinking too much from my head. When it doesn't make sense, when I'm in my heart, that's when it's just a knowing. And we speak about this, like it's just a knowing. We just know. But that comes from really starting to build trust within yourself. And I actually simultaneously, so that's the good story, like quantum leaping. I replaced my corporate income, working with celebrities, all of these wonderful accolades within 6 months of leaving corporate. I wasn't even, I hadn't even fully achieved my certification in coaching, and I was fully booked. That's great. But what a lot of people didn't know was behind the scenes, I was working with a coach on my shadow work. So I was working on past trauma with a small t, and other things, like so many things that I wasn't aware of. It was what I could see. Why was I the way I was? Because what happened was, even when I achieved that, Sarah, there was some self-sabotage going on, because it was almost like I got it, then I would like kind of like burn it.
Yeah.
I'd burn it. I'd be like, right, okay, I don't want that anymore. Like, it's almost like I didn't know what to do with it when I had it, because my entire life it was like, you can't have that.
Yeah.
So I had to really work on my fear, my inner child, all of that stuff that I'd never even heard of when I left corporate. But again, it was that knowing that I need to go underneath the surface of this to really uncover what's going on, because I can't afford to lose this,
Yeah.
because I've got responsibilities. So the shadow work was, and still is, 6 years later, it is so important, because if you can achieve these things, anyone can manifest, by the way. You can actually put yourself in a place where you're like, I'm going to visualize this thing and I'm going to feel it. And I did that, and I visualized, I manifested from kind of that place in the start, because I thought that's what you did. But when I got it, I was like, oh, why am I not really receiving this? Like, why am I not feeling how I thought I would feel? But very quickly I was like, that's this shadow thing, isn't it? It's like dark, that deep down, even though my mind's saying, yeah, you've worked hard for that, that's good, but actually you don't really deserve it, you're not good enough. And that's where kind of shadow work came into my life really early on in my journey.
Yeah, same, very, very similar, shadow work. shadow work and the fusion of shadow and alchemy, which is, our coaching method that we train our coaches in, shadow being what sits below conscious awareness. So like you said, what am I not aware of? What am I not seeing? And often what we don't see is the past programs that are running automatically. So they, like 5% of our decisions are conscious, and the rest are kind of guided by the subconscious, unconscious, making up 95%. And when we're not aware of what we're not aware of, it controls us. It decides our fate. It leads us towards certain choices because it's running on these automatic programs. And often I think people have this misconception where the shadow, because it's associated with darkness, and we can think of it as bad. And I feel like I was absolutely terrified to look at my shadow. I had this deep rooted fear that if I looked in there, I would realize that the truth was I was an absolutely terrible individual, that I was a horrible human being. I felt like almost like rotten, like, am I bad? Am I a bad person? Like, what am I going to find underneath there whenever I look in? And actually, what I found was fear, self-doubt, like a scared, kind of like frightened little girl who was frozen in time, and someone who was making decisions from a place of like a 5 and 6-year-old, who had built up these coping mechanisms to help her navigate the world. And actually, it was time for that little girl to release that hold and to soften and to let go, because I was able to take the rein. And it's such, anyone that does shadow work, if you're listening to this and you're navigating your shadow, stay with it. Let us say we see how hard it is. Like, it tests every part of you, emotionally and physically, because you tear down everything that once kept you safe and what you believed was true. But the real beauty comes with whenever that comes into your awareness, and that's what we train our coaches to do. How do we make the unconscious conscious? When that comes into your awareness, what then? What do you do with it? How do you alchemize that? How do you turn that pain, that small T trauma, maybe even that big T trauma? How do you turn that into post traumatic growth? How do you
Yeah.
turn that into um purpose? How do you turn that into passion? How do you turn that into love? How do you transform and alchemize what was once painful into something that now serves you? And that is the beauty of shadow work. And when you do that, you quantum leap. And the reason you quantum leap is your your inner reality has changed, and therefore your outer reality has changed. And because you see the world differently, it acts differently, and it doesn't follow that cause and effect formula that you've learned from the past, that it has to be that way. And that's just how life is. And all of those beliefs fall away. And all of a sudden, you're left with this blank space where you go, it is possible. And actually, life gets to be good, because life is hard anyway without us making harder on ourselves. It's like carrying like a heavy bag, with you through life, like an additional unnecessary burden. Like, life is tough. It's not without its challenges. It comes for all of us. Sickness, grief, self-doubt. It's all there. It's part of the package. But what else are you carrying with you that you can drop? That you can just release and let go of? That's what shadow work does. Once I drop those beliefs of fear, self-doubt, I'm not worthy, oh my goodness, I stepped into my potential. I created things that I could never have imagined that were possible for me, but that only came from wading through that kind of darkness of what was underneath.
She loves herself with Jill Ritchie.
Hey everyone, I am quickly interrupting this episode to tell you how you can win a £10,000 giveaway with the Intuitive Psychology Association and She Loves Herself podcast. To celebrate season 10X, we are giving away a fully funded place training with the Intuitive Psychology Association this October, which means your fees are fully funded on us. So if you have ever thought about training with the Intuitive Psychology Association, if you would like to up-level, upskill and become an intuitive psychology coach with us, which means you are fully accredited to the top level of coaching, then this is the competition for you. All you need to do is make sure that you head over to Instagram to follow both She Loves Herself, the podcast, and the Intuitive Psychology Association. You need to like the post. You need to tag two of your friends, and share it across your social media platform. If you would like 10 additional entries, so 10 times the opportunity to win this prize, all you need to do is leave a 5-star review on this episode. Good luck. I love it, Sarah. I think you have to. And I think people are like, I don't want to look at that. Nah, that's not for me. And I get it. I get it. But what I will say to you is, and I've yet to meet someone that will prove me wrong, you will never be able to receive properly. And I mean from a partner, from friends, even the wealth that you might manifest, you won't be able to receive it. And I mean properly feel it, where you can feel the gratitude that it is pouring throughout your whole, every part of your being. You'll never feel that unless you do your shadow work, because everyone has shame, everyone has fear, everyone has guilt. And a lot of it is through others' expectations of how we are supposed to live, right? It's like, well, you didn't, you're supposed to do it this way and you didn't, or you did this bad thing. And I love that you said frozen in time. For me, it was that. For me, I think when I look back on past relationships, mainly with partners, that there was this fear of really letting someone in, and it was frozen in time. And it goes back to, I was always brought up with my mum, so that was an amazing relationship with my mum. There was no sort of male figure there, so my narrative was men aren't safe. Now, she never said those words, men aren't safe, but what I saw was, don't let them too close to you, because and actually for many years it protected me, but what it did is it also kept me from really, really receiving and being vulnerable in front of men, and allowing people in to help me. And God, it took me a long time to work through that. And I guess the whole part is I was quantum leaping, but I wasn't really feeling how I thought I would feel.
Mm-hmm.
You can quantum leap, but what is the point if you just burn it? Because you're not even receiving it. 95% of us works from our unconscious, right? So that's our subconscious programming. So if there's only 5% operating in the other way, how can you fully receive it? Like, you're only getting
Yeah.
a smidgen of what you think you should feel. Like, that is the difference. Imagine if you decide to not see your shame, your pain, your past. And we've all done things we're not proud of, but we've done it from a place of fear, from a place of time, a frozen point in time where we believed that that's how it should be. And actually, had I not gone in and done that work myself, I wouldn't have understood where that come from. Then I can give compassion to that 5-year-old girl, that 4-year-old girl, because actually it just came from fear. I acted out of a way, and this is for anyone, I acted from a place of fear. And when you act from a place of fear, how can you not really give compassion to that part of yourself? Because it's not the real you. It's not who you, right? It's just a part of you that wanted to keep you safe. But if you aren't going to look at those parts of yourself, you're going to constantly be running that narrative, thinking that something outside of you will meet an internal need, right? I can see you
Yeah.
laughing.
Because I love that you said that. I love that. And that's a big bit of what, we train at IPA. And that's the difference. Like when I was hearing you talk and I felt every single word, that's it. You receive it differently because when you're in that space of needing the outside world to gratify you in some way, when you need the external conditions to be just so, for everybody to act in a way, for the world to operate in a way that makes you feel safe, you relinquish that internal power and you don't receive. But when you get to this place, and it changes and fluctuates, like nothing's permanent, but when you do get to this place of inner peace and inner knowing, when you can satisfy those needs internally, you quantum leap, you receive on a different level, and you also know that it's going to change. You have this deep acceptance of life just as it is. And that's what change is, because what's the point in quantum leaping, like you said, to get there and to burn it, or to get there and go, oh, I'm not worthy of this, or I talked about me getting my book deal with Find Your Flow. I couldn't even tell people about it for like 6 months because I was a little bit scared, a little bit. I felt so vulnerable, and I look back and I think I would receive that completely differently, now. I would receive that in a whole different way, because as well as like feeling safe in the shadow, you have to feel safe in joy and happiness. And actually, that's really hard. We share this Marianne Williamson quote a lot with our students, which is, our greatest fear is not, how inadequate we are, it's how powerful we are. Like, what if you did allow yourself to be everything that you can be? What if you did allow men in a relationship to see you, and to let them in and feel safe? What if I, felt worthy and kind of good enough just as I am? The thought of that like terrified me. So the shadow work and the alchemy work is releasing the past and helping yourself feel safe to hold that joy and gratitude like in the moment, without needing the external world to be a certain way. And my goodness, that's when you contemplate, because you realize that everything's right in front of you. Your
And
eyes just couldn't see it.
you're like, this has all just been a bloody lie.
Yeah.
The lies
Yeah.
we tell ourselves.
I
I
know.
to
That
say
book
that.
that you need to write.
But that book I need to write, the last 6 years I've been telling him to write a book called The Lies We Tell Ourselves. I probably said it on this podcast a number of times, but I've not yet because there's probably so much more in it. And I think each year, Sarah, each week, month, day, I'm like learning more. The shadow is not separate from you, it is you. And how can you make that your friend instead of pushing it further down? It's not going anywhere. In fact, the more you push it down, it starts to manifest in physical illness.
Yeah.
Like, it will not go away because it is not separate from you. It is part of you. How can you love more? How can you? It's the scared part of you. It's the part of you that wanted to protect itself. How can you go in and really communicate with that part and take it on that journey and quantum leap together? And this is reminding me of like we train a lot of, I mean, our shadow alchemy coaching method within IPA, but a big part of that is the inner child, right? And
Hmm.
just, as we're recording this, we've just finished training in that. And that was absolutely mind-blowing. So we have a lot of students with us just now who have trained in various different modalities, and a number of them have said, I've done inner child work before for a number of years, but something happened in that session where, because we don't do surface level, we can. And you can't play at this if you're serious about making shifts and making them quickly and making things happen. You need to work with your shadow. Like, you need to like get in about it, make friends with her, work friends
Yeah.
with her. Like, stop pushing it aside and thinking it's going to be okay, because it it makes up pretty much like
The
95%.
yeah, it's running the majority. And the minute that you can do that, like we are a world within a world, like your inner world, each and every one of us has a subjective experience of reality. You'll have seen this probably even in your family. Two people can grow up in the same household and view the world completely differently, even though on paper they've had very, very similar experiences. And that's because how we interpret the world is dependent on us. So we know from the science and psychology, and we know intuitively, even when we have conversations, that so much of the past shapes who we are and controls our future. And that is the truth. If you want to change your future, you first have to go back and look at the past. As uncomfortable as that is, anything else that you do will always be on a superficial level. If you work with a coach, and you're doing action plans, or maybe you're a coach right now and you set goals and you set action plans with your client, half of your clients will come because they're people pleasing you and they're setting their goals because, hey, there's shame and guilt if you turn up. Anyone would feel that on a weekly basis and you go, yeah, I haven't done it. But the reality is, once that accountability kind of goes, very little change will have happened within that person. That's just science, that's just a fact. They may have changed on a habitual level in some way, but they probably don't feel any different about what they're doing. if you want to create significant change, and if you want to be the type of coach that, really has an impact on someone's life, how they feel, how they act, and how that comes with a degree of like effortlessness, then you have to work with the subconscious programming. You have to do that, and you have to be trained professionally to do that, because you're working with the unconscious, which is the deep kind of like waters of somebody's mind, and you need to be trained to expertly go there.
I love that. And you do. You can't mess about with it because you are working on a really deep level. And that's where I know with us, we spend so much time training on nervous system regulation
Hmm.
because you need to have a regulated nervous system, or at least have the tools to go in and work on that. We spend like 20 minutes working with nervous system before we even take a client into a technique. That's what we train our students. So when we're doing observations, which we do a lot of observations with our students, it's like you need to spend longer in nervous system regulation.
Hmm.
You cannot go in and work with inner child with shadow if the nervous system is not regulated enough, because you can do so much more damage. And if you don't know what you're doing and you're just playing at it, then please stop. Train in this properly. We train our students to they're accredited to diploma level. Um, we have the best training and techniques within any association, I believe, in the world. And do you know, when you were talking, Sarah, it reminded me of so many wealthy, famous people that really struggle with addiction, that
Yeah.
struggle with drugs, alcohol, sex, lots of different things, because the shadow is massively at play. They've achieved, and that, so do not get confused with a quantum leap. And you'll see so many wealthy people that will quantum leap and they have so much wealth, but they are so unhappy and they are in the depths of
Yeah.
depression. So many people will look at them and think, why? What have you got to be depressed about? Look at all your wealth, because they just feel like shit. And it reminded me of, I watched a reel months ago, and it was Gary Vee, and someone came up
Mm.
to him and they said to him at one of his seminars, because someone was capturing it on camera, and he said, you know, I'm a like multi millionaire. I've achieved all these things. I've got 3 children. I've got a beautiful wife. And he said, and I still feel like that poor kid. And
Yeah.
he said to him, he said, I still feel like that poor kid, because he basically got brought up in kind of poverty, never had much. And that was his story. He's like, I'm going to make it. And he made it. And Gary Vee said to him, you need to work on your shadow. That's what he
Yeah.
said. Work on your shadow. You are still that poor kid. So 95% of you still believes you're that poor kid, because you haven't worked on your shadow. So you can keep chasing, you can keep like building all these businesses and have all this wealth, but 95% of you believes you're that poor kid, and you're always going to try and prove yourself. You never feel good enough. You get addicted to things. You're trying to numb out. And that's the thing. And we're going to talk about this in another episode, about when you numb out to try
Hmm.
and feel better about yourself. And that's going to come in another episode, guys. So it's a really good one about coping mechanisms. And actually, the more work that you do on your shadow, the more you stop numbing out, the more
I
you stop consuming these things.
I love this. As you're talking, I can't. This phrase keeps on coming up in my mind, which is the shadow will find a shortcut. Because the shadow's always trying to reveal itself. So it will find a shortcut to present itself. It's an internal reality that needs an external manifestation so that you can see it. So when you're feeling good, but you're still that poor kid, or you're still, not good enough, or you're still like a piece of crap, or whatever it is for you in your internal narrative, it will manifest in addiction. It will manifest in, self-sabotage, because the shadow will find a shortcut until you look at it, And when we talk about quantum leaping, it's quantum leaping in an external reality and an internal reality. You want to quantum leap not only what you experience in the external world, but how you feel about it. How do you feel about it? Like when you get there, you want to be able to receive it. And that's why we've done the depths of shadow work and continue to do it. Like I've trudged through parts of me that honestly, when I've kind of gone really, really inwards, and I've had to have, experts kind of come in and help me facilitate it, because I couldn't get to those places myself. And when I tell you that I wanted to run because it felt like the darkest part of me, um, like we use a technique within the Intuitive Psychology Association called unlayering, which is really, really powerful. And I used that in myself, and I got to this core wound, which for me, is always about self-worth and worthiness. And we use this technique, and it's like, what's underneath, when I say that I spent so long, and every time it was like nothing, darkness, more dark, hate, and I felt like I'm broken, I'm never going to get to the bottom of this. And then I did. And the thoughts sometimes are still there, but I can't find the feeling in my body. And that's what shadow work does, is it changes your body, it frees your body from the past. So although thoughts may drift into my mind, like, who are you? You're not good enough. They would have been accompanied with like tightness in my stomach, feeling sick, throat closing over. Those feelings in my body have kind of moved through. Like when you train in this work, you're training on a somatic level, on a cognitive level, on an energetic level, to create profound shifts, and behavior changes that feel natural and not forced, not something that every day you've got to wake up and think, I've got to do this now, and I've got to work on my self-worth. Like we talked about this, you were in Italy, I was in Glastonbury, and we've had to work a lot on our gratitude. I feel grateful, I'm really, really happy, and cultivate it in. And that is just spontaneously arising naturally for both of us, where it's like, oh my goodness, everything lands in a different way. And that's the beauty of this work. And imagine doing that for yourself and clients. Like, what a gift.
Oh my, it is the best and the worst. As
Yeah.
in, it can feel like dog charge, and we're not going to dress that up. But it's so bloody free. I mean, who are you running from? You're running from yourself. Like, I'll say it again, it's not separate from you. Stop treating it like it's another person. It's like, bring it into light. Like, bring it in and treat it with the love, compassion, and kindness that it deserves. And then you're free. Like, then you are free and you feel life on a different level. And quantum leaping for us now gives us both goosebumps. We feel it deeply. It gets us emotional. And it's that kind of knowing when you drop in, like, it's possible. It's possible. And everyone that trains with us knows this to be true. We take this work really seriously. So if you are thinking about shadow work or training, make sure that you do your research. Make sure that the people that are training don't just say they're qualified. You just do your research, because this work is beautiful but deep work. But it's the keys to freedom. It's the keys to quantum leaping and feeling the way that you're supposed to feel. It's letting go of past stories, old shame narratives, all of the dark, and just really stepping into your true potential, your true light, with non-attachment. And it's there for everyone if you decide to take it. Yeah, it's the best. It's the most transformational work, I believe, in the world that can be done in the coaching industry. Yeah, what a powerful
Agreed.
episode.
So powerful. And just while it's in my head, actually, because if you're listening to this and you are interested, I'm just wondering if we can drop maybe in the notes our free masterclass, because we've talked a little bit about our shadow alchemy coaching method. If you want to understand more about what that means, we've got a free masterclass on our website that will kind of give you like a bit more detail on that.
Do that at the end.
Yeah.
Let's drop it in. We will drop that in the show notes. And of course, come and follow us on Instagram at we.r.ipa. I'll put all the links in the show notes, and we will see you all in another episode.